All right, well, good evening, everybody. I'd like to go ahead and call our first meeting of the Denton County Confederate Art Committee meeting to order. And this is our first public meeting. This is the first of 4 public meetings that we're going to have across the county. And I'd like to introduce some of our committee members that are with us tonight. I'd like to introduce Commissioner Bobby Mitchell. She is with us.
How are you?
Ms. Cheryl English.
Hello.
Zenobia Hutton. John Baines. And Bill Lawrence. And so one of our committee members, Dwayne Edwards, is not with us at this time, so he may be coming in just a little bit. I'd like to thank y'all for being here. I would like to read some opening comments here. This is from our public comment form. And so I'd encourage everyone, if you haven't filled out a form, we'd encourage you to do so. We'd also like to hear your verbal testimony as well. But thank y'all for taking time to come to the Denton County Courthouse-on-the Art Committee's listening tour. We sincerely appreciate your involvement in this process. In November 2018, the Denton County Confederate Memorial Advisory Committee unanimously voted to keep the Confederate Memorial at its current location on the Denton Downtown Square and add historical context to tell the complete story about slavery. This committee was formed as a procurement committee to help identify a vendor for a public sculpture to bring historical context to the Confederate Memorial as directed. The committee is governed by state mandate to handle this in a fair and confidential manner. As such, we are not able to deliberate about the status of the Confederate Memorial today. We are asking everyone to share their ideas for a proposed sculpture, a historical statement etched in stone, and information for our kiosk to be installed at the Courthouse-on-the lawn. You're welcome to provide your comments publicly here tonight. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you do not feel comfortable speaking, please fill out the public comment form and leave it with us. And we also welcome your other comments if you think of something additional, and you can email us at the artcommittee@dentoncounty.com. Okay? So, with no further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. And our first person registered to speak is Brant Weatherford. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are y'all?
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. My name is Brant Weatherford. I'm a resident of Denton County, down at Crossroads for about the last 12 years now. When I was a young man, I went to Dachau, a World War II camp in southern Germany. We all know the horrors that occurred in these and other camps during the Second World War. But these horrors are not the focus of my speaking here tonight. My focus is upon a nation's acceptance of their responsibility for the horrors that they visited on their fellow human beings, how they honor and remember that history, what we can learn today from their actions moving forward. In 2005, my family hosted a German foreign exchange student. Carl was from northern Germany. He spent his junior year in high school with us, and it was a very positive experience. Carl and his family visited us last summer. In conversation, I asked him about those times before his birth, when his country was so deeply involved in those past horrors, and how he and his countrymen and women today reflect on that time. He said that beyond the sadness and shame that Germany felt for its role in that particular piece of history, Germany was committed to honor these innocents who perished by keeping the camps open and visible for all to see and remember. And while many German citizens at the time, fighting bravely and passionately for their homeland, also perished in its towns, in its villages, and on its battlefields, Germany would remember its dead not by statues to them on the village greens, but by maintaining and honoring those places where the most innocent had perished, the camps. To do anything more or anything less would obscure the stark reality of their country's roles and responsibilities. And we in this great country have our own horrors. We had camps we called plantations, a diaspora we called Negroes, and an institution called slavery. We had 400 years of suffering and horror visited upon our fellow human beings. We built our economic engine and paced national growth on the suffering of our slaves. We propelled ourselves forward while we held back and continued to enslave others. We denied equal rights and protections to specific members of the human race based on their color and on our greed. We tore our country in two in our attempt to prolong the horror. And once defeated in this most unholy and unchristian of causes, we erected statues to our southern fallen to remind those recently unchained that the leg irons they once carried were being replaced by the legal irons of Jim Crow. We persist in this horror today on our courthouse square. The time has come for America, Texas, Denton County to accept our responsibility as our former World War II adversaries have for the horrors. And for those who fought even in innocence on the side of injustice, we must not continue to honor their service in this cause with statues on the village green. We must turn the statues of this unholy cause away from the village square, away from the eyes of our children and our future generations, away from the public spotlight. We must seek an honest, honorable presentation of our past history for our nation's future and the future of our world and all of its people. We must honor those most aggrieved through our compassion, through our understanding, and through our actions. The removal of the Confederate statue from the courthouse square, a place reserved for the communal good, for the exercise of justice, and for the general welfare of our citizens, is a small but significant step for our state and for our nation in this healing process. Though we have not healed yet, and we may not be healed in our lifetime, let us not miss this opportunity to move another step in the right direction and join with generations who came before us, who saw and acted upon the opportunities to do better for our world and for our fellow human beings. In closing, to paraphrase the late Dr. Martin Luther King on the night of his untimely death, well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. So I've come to you this evening to ask of you, can we, as citizens of this great land, not remove the statue from the village square, and in doing so, take one more step towards the promised land? Thank you for your time.
Okay. Next, is it Pam Hancock?
She's going to write something down.
Oh, perfect. Okay, you want to submit something? Okay, perfect. Next is Fritz Poppy. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Thank you for being here, sir.
I may be slightly off the mark because I didn't realize that the purpose of this meeting is what to put next to the statue.
Yes, sir.
But to tell the story about slavery, well, slavery is just a piece of the topic. There's nothing said about the subjugation and segregation and humiliation that lasted for at least 100 years afterwards. Having to step off the sidewalk and not be able to eat and stay in places. It wasn't just slavery. Slavery turned the corner a little bit. But, and then the civil rights that were denied by the poll tax and not getting to vote, and they're still trying to suppress the vote right today. I had some, this has been, I shared this in the Denton paper, parts of it earlier, Denton County is a subdivision of the state of Texas, which is a subdivision of the United States of America. The Confederate States of America fought a bloody war against the United States of America and did not prevail. Japan fought the United States of America in World War II and did not prevail. There are no monuments in Honolulu honoring the Japanese pilots who served with honor. There should be no Confederate honoring monuments on public property in the USA, period. The descendants of Confederate veterans can honor their ancestors wherever they are buried. No one is buried at the Confederate monument on the Denton Square. You will not desecrate anyone's grave by removing the monument. Sell it or give it away, but just do it. Thank you.
All right. Next is Mr. Willie Hudspeth.
Before coming here, I was thinking that I feel so alone with my efforts. When I appear before the county commissioners, it's like going to a place where I'm being sentenced before I even get a trial, and I'm guilty. I am dead, or the penalty is guilt, not guilt. The decision is guilty before anything I present. Feel that way every Tuesday when I go to stand before the Commissioner's Court. The two gentlemen that presented here just now gives me hope. This committee that was put together is just flawed with the opposite of what we're supposed to be trying to do here. It's just packed with, we've already made our decision and you're guilty. That's what I sense. But those two men who just gave those remarks just now just gives me hope. Whether or not you do whatever you're going to do, because I've noticed and I see it every Tuesday, you're going to do whatever you want to do. I want to comment about that. I don't know what in the world or why you worked so hard, the commissioners, at trying to keep that thing where it is. It's horrible what it represents. I think that I'm going to add to my discussion on Tuesday about that one point that the gentleman made. There are no bodies there. If it's a memorial to the people who lost their lives, why aren't the bodies there? Why, better said, move the memorial where the bodies are so we can memorialize those men and women who did die. I don't get it. Why do you keep working so hard to keep it there when it just seems like it would be obvious? You don't want something there, no matter what art you put on it, that's going to remind us of slavery. And I know some other things were part of that struggle, but the only one that really troubles me is the slavery part. Do you even know what slavery is all about? Just imagine coming over here on a boat on the side. You're laying on the side for days in excrement and just, you can't move. That's just one of the horrible things that I remember. But you persist in saying, we want that thing to stay. The commissioners do.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to take these other side sheet here? Perfect. Ms. Jennifer Lane.
Good evening. I'm going to read my first message ever sent on this topic to the Commissioner's Court. I'm writing to urge that the Denton County Confederate Soldier Memorial at the Denton Courthouse Square, erected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy and the Texas United Confederate Veterans, be removed from its current location and placed in a museum. I'm aware of the efforts by the Texas Historical Society to thwart several previous efforts and petitions to have it removed. However, the time has come for it to be removed. When this county went into World War twice in the 20th century to defend democracy, African Americans rightly pointed out that defending democracy in Europe was hypocritical in the face of the institutionalization of Jim Crow segregation at home in the U.S., legitimized by the Supreme Court in 1896. This paradox sparked many early 20th century African American civil rights efforts. The reaction, particularly in the South, was severe. In the 1920s, the KKK had 5 million members. In this context, a revisionist history about the Confederacy was fostered and monuments were erected. In Denton, African Americans were forced out of Quakertown. Lynchings, incarcerations, and other violations against African Americans occurred during this time, and the, quote, Great Migration to the North took place in the 1920s and 30s. After World War II and long efforts by African Americans to achieve their civil rights, in 1948, President Henry Truman integrated the United States Armed Forces. In 1954, the Supreme Court ruled on Brown versus Board of Education, integrating the public schools. During the 1950s and 60s, the resurgence of Confederate flags and other symbols were used as part of the fight led by Dixiecrats like Strom Thurmond to gain public support for the prevention of civil rights for African Americans and for sustaining Jim Crow segregation. These Confederate symbols, flags, and monuments can no longer be used as focal points for civic pride. All Confederate states' articles of secession insisted upon the right to own slaves. Denton's 1918 monument should be moved to a museum, or at this point I would say it could also be dismantled and taken apart and gotten rid of. And its history made clear it does not belong at the Courthouse Square in a display of civic pride to be celebrated. It cannot remain there any longer. And I have a picture here that I sent to all of you that includes the Daughters of the Confederacy. So these innocent grandmas, as one person said, your great-grandma was, your nana was super racist. So, further, the history of the monuments is not a good one. And if you want to keep it, it's not a particularly good example. It's been damaged already. When the Pietà sculpture in the Vatican, which is a great work of art, was damaged, they took it indoors instantly. They didn't wait around for a single second before they got this beloved item behind bulletproof glass. If this thing is loved and wanted to be kept, it should be kept somewhere safe, which is not outdoors, where too many people don't want to look at it any longer as a focal point of civic pride. And following up on my previous letter, I'm writing to underscore the need for urgency in removing the Denton County Confederate Soldier Memorial, which is erected by the United Daughters. Such long inaction puts at risk the chance to find middle ground. Although there are many who would like to see it destroyed and many who wish it kept as is, the majority would accept it being moved to a safe place that explains its full historical context. It was put up during the time of Jim Crow segregation. It should not be standing at the symbolic entrance to justice, in other words, the courthouse. The monument is about to arrive and has now arrived at its 100th anniversary. It can't be allowed to be a rallying point for neo-Nazis and racists, which it has been. And that all happened since the time I wrote this. It must be removed before its commemorations can occur. Even the descendants of Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson are calling for the removal of these statues. Thank you. Lots of links included. Please, move it somewhere. Out of view. Thank you.
Is it anyone else wanting to speak this evening?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I'll speak. I just have a brief statement. My name is James H. Carr.
I live in Denton. I was going to submit this as a written comment because I'm kind of steamed about this whole thing, but I think I can read it calmly to you. The so-called Confederate Memorial is an obscenity and must be removed. It is not art. It is not honoring the fallen. It is an expression of white supremacy. As long as it stands, it amplifies the hatred embodied by Jim Crow and segregation in the United States.
Is there anyone else in attendance wishing to speak tonight? So there's no input to us. So I've got a variety of comments here that were to remove the statue Do you have any
I have
input
an
for
idea,
us to?
and I mean this seriously.
Yes, sir.
Why not have a competition for an artist to stage the demolition and make a video of it and hire composers and performers to produce the score?
Okay.
I have a similar idea. A season of temporary art all around the courthouse lawn on this topic. Let artists express themselves, people in general, but temporary art, so that it's removable.
Okay. Good. Okay.
You all know that we are acting on the advice or the recommendation of a committee that was put together. Okay.
I volunteered for that committee, but I guess I was considered to be more frozen in my stance than Mike Cochran, even though I'm not.
But we have a lot, we pick at a variety of people to
I know.
give their opinion.
But you would have heard long ago of the suggestion of temporary art exhibit, and working through that, to work through the real public reaction, including the public reaction that maybe loves it.
Okay. So, as I kind of was saying earlier, this is a listening tour, and so we appreciate y'all coming out and providing your input to us as we move forward with a process to conceptualize and contextualize the memorial that's there based on the recommendation of the committee that made a unanimous recommendation to the Commissioners Court to keep the memorial in its existing place and to add context. And so that's what the Commissioners Court appointed this body to then go out and implement the wishes of the committee. And the wishes of the committee was to keep the memorial where it's at and to add some additional art and video context as well with the installation of electric kiosk or more adjacent to help tell the story of the slavery, the civil rights movement, and the memorial as a stance. So that is what that's what we're charged to do. So we're here as a listening opportunity tonight, and that's exactly what we wanted to do, make some notes here. So, yes, ma'am.
Since that's the reason you held this meeting, actually, somehow or another you have to get this out to the public, and I don't really know how that's going to work, since so many people do not read the paper anymore.
Right.
And we saw one little announcement in there, and that's why I came. Since you wanted that, but you're not getting it, then you need to come up with some other idea to get a large number of people, even though they may not believe in what you plan on doing.
Right.
To give you examples of what they would have put there if they were to believe it.
Right.
And I don't know whether you hold, take it to the colleges, take it to the high schools, whatever, they probably all have some ideas about it. And it actually could be some sort of a contest. And let the committee then decide on what they want to do.
I will explain what has been explained in Commissioners Court and has been reported as well. And then we also, to advertise this meeting and the future meetings, we have done Facebook posts and paid ads to help promote this out to the different zip codes here in Denton County. We do plan on having a national search to find an artist to submit renderings and qualifications to us that will then submit actual renderings. And so we're looking to have a national search for artists to submit. So when you're talking about a contest, so it'd be different than a temporary art contest, but this would be a permanent art installation on the courthouse lawn. So that's what the Commissioners Court, that's what was asked by the committee, and that is what the Commissioners Court accepted that and adopted that position, and so that's the stage that we're at today.
Until everything is completed.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. Please turn the water on.
Okay.
In the meantime, please get the water going.
Okay.
And an explanation of whether temporary or permanent as to what that means.
Say again?
Something to explain to the public that may wonder what's going on with the water flowing, what it really means.
Okay. All right?
And we do want information from the citizens. That's why we're having a meeting, to get information from the citizens. So, yes, ma'am.
I have noticed that the opposition to having it moved has melted quite a bit. There are still a few voices, but vast majority of comments you hear anytime this subject comes up are in favor of seeing it go. That's a bit of change.
Demolition.
It is loud. It's not a great work of art.
No, it's not hard at all.
Did you have one more comment?
This is just a question. I watched some of the Commissioners Court meeting, and I believe as you were discussing this process and the appointment of this group and such, and that this is a listening ear and such, that there was a motion and an agreement among the commissioners that unless this group of people unanimously agrees on its very last vote, the very last minute of its time together, that the commissioners, as a group that voted, they're not really going to consider anything. So are you all in that same, is that what, that's your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be clear about that.
Right. A recommendation presented to the court needs to be unanimous of this body.
Item 5, unanimous?
It just seems
No,
like
this
that,
is here.
it just appeared to me that, because I went to all of the meetings, I was not chosen, but I was very interested and wanted to attend all the meetings. But it seemed like that was a lot of pressure on the committee, that they weren't all of one mind, okay? They were not. It was very clear. And so at the last minute, to kind of put the boom down and go, you must, you have to. It's just, to me, a little bit skewed.
Okay.
And so I don't really, it just doesn't look like fair play to me when you say you have to have this or it's not going to work.
May I respond to your comment?
Sure.
As the chairman of that committee, as the chairman of the committee,
Yes.
we have 15 people there. And at one time, we had 10 people voting to keep the statute, and 5 voted on moving it. So that's where we were. The commissioners asked us to come back with a supermajority. Otherwise, we're forcing the decision upon them, okay? Rather than coming back with a recommendation, okay? So they tried to at least hear from the community, and in hearing from the community, it was about a 50-50 in all of the sessions that we had. So when we got together, there were some ideas that came forth that I'll use something that someone said. That statute tells one story. Paul Harvey says we have to tell the rest of the story. So it's up to this committee to make sure that we tell the rest of the story. And I realize, like tonight we're listening, we weren't supposed to comment, but I felt a little bothered since I was the chairman of that committee. And we worked very hard and very long to listen to everyone, which is not an easy thing to do, to listen to everyone and then come to a conclusion. But we did decide that to do the 15-0 is what we came up with if we put strong context there and provided kiosks with lots of information so that people realize that statute doesn't tell the whole story. It does not.
Okay.
First of all, if a 5-member governing body that couldn't come to unanimity itself asked 15 people to do it. So that's kind of odd. And the other thing is that the breakdown of opinion, the 10 people to 5 people, is the same 10 to 5 basic ratio that gave us Jim Crow, and before that gave us the Articles of Secession demanding the continuation of slavery in this area. In other words, nothing's changed enough. The makeup of the citizenry is the same because it's the descendants the same. The minority population is still minority, the majority population is still majority. The problem is a persistent one. And there is really only, in my opinion, one source of voice that matters in this. And that is what the African-American community wants to see done. There may be disagreement and difference of opinion within the African-American community about this particular issue, but that's the only voice that should be speaking about it. The people whose ancestors were treated in this fashion. That it doesn't matter that there's a majority that wants to keep that up. That majority should have no voice in this.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say one other thing. I'm all about teaching people about what happened and how wrong it was. And people learn by seeing things. And I think we have to ask ourselves, do we learn more if there is nothing there? Or can we learn more by having it there? Because I can think about teachers taking groups of students there and talking to them about the Civil War and what happened and how people have different opinions. We weren't living with those people who made that decision to put that. We are thinking it was part of Jim Crow, and maybe it was. But does that mean that the mothers and the grandmothers and the sisters and the wives of the Civil War veterans did not grieve just as the ones in the North? I think it's what you said. It's not the whole picture. We need the whole picture, and we need to use it to teach people that that was a very sad time in our history.
Okay. Points well made, points well taken.
If
Yes, sir.
the so-called majority, which is you 5, 6, you're the majority, you're the voice of the community. You're going to make a decision, and it's going to be the voice, or you're speaking for the community. I sit on that committee, that 15-member committee. It's pretty obvious what voice that committee was speaking for. Now, the 6 of you seems like the same voice is coming again. You're saying to my people who have suffered many, many years, you have a remedy. And your remedy is to leave that thing on the square that reminds me and others like me of the horrendous situation that we had to endure. That seems like what you're about. And I just question, are you the voice for me? Is that a fair voice for me and those who suffered all these years? I beg to differ. I don't think you're my voice, but we're in the United States. And here, the majority rules, and the elected officials speak. That's just the way it is, but you're not my voice.
Okay.
That's okay, Lord.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So there's been what you say?
Let's go.
I would just like to make a comment on one thing that was mentioned by the committee there, that the notion of putting a kiosk of some kind of, erecting something with writing or electronic tablets or carving it even in granite. This particular statue, which came from a Confederate statue mill up north, is in the most prominent possible place in the square. By its position and by its nature, it cannot be equaled educationally or otherwise by something next to it with text. It doesn't express itself with text. It expresses itself with military regalia and white supremacy. That's what it does. I drove into this town for the first time, I think, in 2005, and I saw that, and I was completely shocked. It still shocks me every time I see it.
Was there anyone else? I know we had some people show up late. Did y'all want to make any public comments? Anyone in attendance? Okay. Thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate y'all being here.
3 more days.
We've got 3 more meetings.
You're welcome to all of them.
But before y'all leave, I want to, before we adjourn the meeting, before we adjourn the meeting, I would just like to say, thank y'all for coming out tonight. We do appreciate your input, and we have 3 more meetings like this, plus we sent y'all an email about you have an email address, we'd love to get information from y'all and some ideas. There was a lot of discussion tonight about removing the statute, and so that decision was made to keep it, okay? And so I would just encourage y'all to come back to us, and we would love to hear input from y'all about what other art and how could we best tell the story. There was a lot of comments tonight about removing this statute. What I'm asking on behalf of the committee is that if y'all have ideas or things that you would like to see represented, or themes that you would like to be told, or there's ideas that you would like to have included, or if you know of artists, be part of our process. That's what this is about. And if you have ideas, we would love to hear that and document that, put that in to our, and take that into consideration as we make our decision-making process, okay? So, yes, ma'am.
You were not the judge when this previous committee was.
Right.
It is I believe that you have every right to institute your own process and to revisit this from scratch if you want.
Yes.
I think you do. And I think you would have a lot of support for that. And I think that from what I can tell, I think that the heart of this has shifted slightly. And it's a question of giving yourself permission. And I think you should.
Thank you for your comments.
I realize you've got all woe and trouble if you do, but you also have a lot of support.
Thank you. All right.
And if you have any written comments or if you are